Hi, everybody. My name's Anita. I want to start off by thanking Millicent and Jean for inviting me to read in their wonderful Loose Lips poetry series in Topanga. Obviously, I'm not in Topanga. I'm in my apartment in Brentwood, but we're all home, aren't we? Because everything is virtual. I thought I would start off this reading with two Ars Poetica poems, give you a little insight into how I feel about poetry. And these two poems are from my first full-length book called The Butcher's Diamond. And the first one is called Why I Read Poetry. Dad, the Brooklyn College soapbox you stood on is now a screen. Your socialist angst, a tweet, a flash mob, a Facebook emoji. Unlike cell phones, your rotary phone dialed leisurely while circumnavigating its numbered orb. And of course, your books, those towers of books repeatedly offered a new leaf to turn. So much of your life was lived at a different pace, with time to explore the promising possibilities of fairness, of decency. Now everything is brutally condensed, shortened, baled, and compacted in wire-wrapped sound bites. I confess that lately I can no longer find my way without the tyrannical guidance of a heartless GPS. But Dad, occasionally I stumble on a poem that delivers an oxygen blast, a poem that stops me short in a realm of stark recognition, which is when I dust off a few of those precious non-digital skills you gifted so long ago. Whisper thanks and reroute. The next Ars Poetica poem is a poem that happened when one of my grandchildren, this was a couple of years ago, was asking me about the meaning of a poem. To the best I remember, it was William Carlos Williams' Red Wheelbarrow, which is a poem I love. I know you all do. And he was asking, what does it mean? And this poem happened. What a poem means for Jake. It means what you think it means. All that, but less. True, the words originate with intent. Intent is not meaning. Eyes flicker left, right, brain conjures, grief rises and falls, context becomes a neighborhood. You move in, new kid on the block, fight off the bullies, find a BFF. I was lucky enough during the pandemic to have during quarantine, to have a new book come out. And that book is Toast, came out a couple of weeks ago. And I thought I would read a couple of quarantine pandemic poems. You know us poets, we sit around at home locked up. What are we going to write about? We write about the pandemic, we write about quarantine. So here's one from Toast, which is called You Okay? In this quarantine marathon, morning is evening, hours poorly punctuated like a run-on sentence suffer from adjective flooding. Long, frightening, sad, sunny, dreary, endless. Innocent verbs face the danger of domestic abuse. Wake, cook, sleep, shower, wash, eat. Eyeglasses steam up over masks, droplets swarm like summer's no-see-ums. April arrives, cherry trees bloom, daffodils sparkle in exhaust-free air. Mockingbirds imitate screaming sirens. How small the difference between noise and song. My love, look up. The sun rises and sets. The faint moon promises. Okay. Now, while I was reading that poem here sitting on my dining room table, the birds were going crazy outside. I don't know if the microphone picked it up, but that was real poetic encouragement. We have an incredible mockingbird who lives on the tree right outside our balcony. One more pandemic poem. This one is called Ars Poetica During a Pandemic, and it has an epigraph. The unexamined life is not worth living, Socrates. Fleeting images that show up in verse, love, death, grief, joy, bullied by a sharp line break or hidden rhyme scheme. Words mercilessly edited, meticulously arranged, ruthlessly aimed at a vulnerable target, kneading, sculpting the everyday into a life worth living, risking capture by a quarantined reader ecstatically staking a claim, kidnapping, demanding a ransom no poet could ever come up with. This poem was inspired by a friend who told me that she was going to live through the quarantine by going into her closet and dressing up every day. And this is called Pandemic Reality Show. Another quarantined morning, weather irrelevant, she walks into her closet, inhales stale scents, and with the power of a fairy tale kiss, wakes a dormant dress, gingerly removes it from a dusty hanger, decides to revive one neglected outfit every quarantine day. Smooths the silk dress, lays it out on her bed, showers, combs her graying hair, puts on makeup, earrings, wraps her mother's ancient pearl necklace around her neck, grabs her phone, snaps a selfie, smiles at an aging woman wearing her favorite blue silk, deftly redefining a shapeless day. Allowing the silk to caress her, she stares out the bedroom window at the cloudless blue sky, hits send. So I thought I'd read a few. I'm not calling them love poems, I'm calling them relationship poems. I've been married a long time and I have a lot of love poems and relationship poems. And this first one is from my very first chapbook. I practiced law for many years and then happily, as I was retiring, traded legal writing for poetry. And just about that time, this chapbook happened, Perfect Diet. And this first poem from that book is called Sushi a la carte. A tubular trough winds along a shiny wood counter. A smoky plastic cover is lifted to reveal a moist world of mossy plants, a miniature river where hideous leggy creatures with transparent armatures jitter. Beside me, people chatter. I cannot make out their words, nor can I wake while they cheerfully grab the little critters, dip them into elaborate sauces, teeth crunching small bodies to bits while drooling spittle and sauce. Watching, I wonder why I am unable to make better decisions. Either join them or leave them. Choose a world more suited to my sensibilities or abandon this dream. But I am tightly wedged, cannot move. At first light, my sleep-warmed mind turns to memories of dinner, visions of raw fish, green mustard, pickled ginger, and you, of my failure to ignore petty issues, stop suffering, and simply enjoy whatever we have ordered. So I already mentioned that I'm in a wonderful long marriage, and you would get that. You would know a lot about that right away from this poem, which is called, surprise, My Long Marriage. I keep it on me at all times, this ethereal garment, wrapping shoulders, entwined around legs, woven between toes. It cushions my step, often irritates, never really fits, requires constant adjustment, infiltrates every pore. A basso continuum follows me everywhere. Others hear nothing. This steady hum is easily missed beneath the shimmer and allure of topside melody, but in its pulsing beat is a love song disguised as daily survival. We appear to others as an oddity, a kind of aging two-headed creature, wedded to habits and patterns which can still land a perfect blow, and whatever vulnerability has never calloused will never harden. Oddly, I continue to examine and parse the mystery of us, despite knowing no barrage of words can ease the way for the tsunami of loss when only one of us remains. And here's one more on the topic of relationships called from my another chapbook of mine called The Lovely Mundane. And this poem is titled, How Did You Do That? There is so much about you that is not enough, but I cannot quantify what that is, that deficit, that irregularity that turned me around, made me dizzy so many years ago, has irritated me for so long. But you have convinced me that I alone can correct this indefinable imbalance and created a love story of epic proportions that draws me in anew every day of my life. So, as I think I mentioned, I live here in California, but I also live in New York. I'm basically a born and bred New Yorker, and my kids and grandchildren are out here. And when we started to retire, we wound up here and happily part of the Southern California poetry community. Um, but I thought I would read a couple of New York poems, New York themed poems, of which I have many, as you might guess. And for years, I was a commuter on the subway, and this poem was inspired by something I saw, and it's titled One Poet Too Many. In the dank underground passage between the L train and the 3, New Yorkers faced east and west. Midway, tattered hand-lettered signs taped to cinder block walls announce, I write poems. I am a New York Times published poet. I will write a poem to order. Crumpled on the ground is the poet. A fortress of ragged clothes surrounds him as he sleeps. Commuters rush by. Not one wakes him to order a poem. The rush hour hordes move in waves like schools of fish. In the dim tunnel light, to a wounded poet, we may actually seem connected. So this is also on the topic of New York, of raising kids in the city, rather than where we knew anything about nature. It took us a long time to learn that. And this one's called Metropolitan Farming. First, the bulbs from a third grade school catalog that quietly died in their cracked coffee cup. Then, propped on toothpicks, the avocado pit, stretching its desperate roots into stale water before forbidding farewell to the disgruntled potato, too busy rotting to notice. Next came the goldfish and hamsters, showered with attention and treats until they too keeled over. And so we taught our city children responsibility, the wonder of life-giving forces, how to cope with disappointment, the art of pushing on. And living on the Upper West Side of Manhattan and having friends who were much more spiritual maybe than I and into a lot of the Eastern arts. We did a lot of talking about feng shui. And this poem happened after one of our in-depth conversations. And it's called Feng Shui in 13E. I'm feeling reckless, reading Kerouac, studying Feng Shui, leaving the toilet seat cover up in an attempt to allow bad chi to escape through New York City sewers. Cannot recall when I last cleaned the bowl. Even the worst of chi may refuse my offer. After checking that the doorman is on duty, I open wide the front door. Chi wafts through 13E, delighted with the absence of locks and chains. I run the water in the bathtub, creating a trickling fountain. Check my image in the mirror, now reflecting a babbling brook. Move furniture, begin to understand the art of relationships, connectivity, toilets, open doors, water and reflecting mirrors, all arranged, rearranged, setting the stage for absolute bliss. Then nothing. I hold vigil for the arrival of inner peace. Ambulance sirens scream, neighbors shout, children cry, dogs bark. I watch you trip over the chair I have just moved to allow for the free movement of chi. While you curse, I move the chair back, turn off the water in the tub, rechain the front door, hope that chi will forgive me, allow me to get on with muddling through an ancient art I have spent years perfecting. I'm going to read a poem that's pre-pandemic when we were all still traveling. This poem is titled Breakfast at Ye Olde Big Chain Inn. In a traveler's hurry, we dash to the Continental Breakfast Cafe. I am unsure which continent the sign refers to. The roar of the interstate adds basso to the piped-in music. Vast plastic pitchers pour Cheerios and Frosted Flakes into cardboard bowls. Dried oatmeal from one spigot meets hot water from another. Blindingly yellow eggs, neatly aligned in a chafing dish, are of suspicious origin, unlikely chicken. Bacon curled and congealed warms in the dish next to the eggs, suggesting it was pre-cooked in a rural factory long after the death of the donor pig. Doughy pastry sits on Windex glass shelves and speaks to the vagaries of old age. As stacks of hermetically sealed butter and jam offer comfort and induce guilt at criticizing the corporate largesse offered. And finally, genuine bananas grown somewhere exotic, chipped green across rolling seas, proof that somewhere an industrial nutritionist understood the importance of providing one thing capable of spoiling to keep things real. The next poem was inspired by our recent change of clocks of time, and it's called How to Fall Back, Spring Forward. When the family clock chimes, do not hesitate. Move deliberately into or away from eerie morning light. There's no rush, an on-time arrival, now an anachronism. Raise your eyebrows, watch as wisdom makes a red carpet entrance, grinning, posing for flashing cameras, arrogantly preaching the gospel of reckoning with body parts worn thin. Now swivel gingerly, venture into memory's marshy muck. Get your bearings. Prepare for a surprising number of unscheduled stops. Out of the corner of your eye, note dear ones cheering. Wave to them, shout. Watch me navigate. Assume everyone you love hears you above the deafening tick tock. And then I wanted to end with a poem called Selfie Without Device, which kind of a little bit of a trip down memory lane. And gives you a chance to learn a little bit more about me. In the 50s, I began to understand temporal limitations as people, animals, and objects sped by, and the dog ran away before we named it. Grandparents died without explanation, people moved, friends morphed overnight from best to worst. In the 60s, I grew breasts, braided my hair, put on a peasant skirt, and fell for boys whose names I do not recall. Struggled through a large anonymous high school memorizing all of world history and geometry, facts soon lost in a violent sneeze. Subwayed to college, marched for and against, joined the hordes of sensitive English majors weeping at injustice, claimed a boy whose name I remembered, had 2 extraordinary kids, and hit the 70s clutching a law degree and an attitude, reminding the judge barking at me for wearing sneakers in the courtroom that, in fact, it was not his fault. Greedy decades devoured assumptions against all odds. Love, tossed and windswept, survived. Grandchildren appeared, waving fists of DNA. And though the fog of the past is thicker and harder to penetrate, I find myself stopping short, taking note of stunning details I must have missed, never pausing long enough to say cheese. That's it. Thanks again.